freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 491 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by Pot of Gold Estate Auctions, where you set the price on guns, ammo, accessories, jewelry, coins, collectibles, antiques, you name it. Find us at pogauctions.com. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our theme today is gun facts versus gun fiction. And our guest today is Guy Smith. Guy is the creator of GunFacts.info. Guy is a market researcher who exposes gun policy misinformation from both sides of the debate with data, integrity, and zero affiliations. No NRA, no Everytown, no party, just agenda-free facts.
I am so excited to have you on. Welcome to the show, Guy Smith.
I'm excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And, trying to cut through the noise is such a hard thing. Just, even having a casual conversation with somebody in an elevator or at a dinner party, because we all think that we know because we kind of segment ourselves off in what we consume to know. And I love your tagline on your website. We are neither pro nor anti-gun. We are pro-math and anti-B.S. So take it from there and talk to us about your work.
Well, that is the lifeblood of what we do. The origin story of GunFacts is kind of fun. I was in college. I was watching the evening news one night, and the talking head for whatever network it was, talked about the epidemic of gun violence in America. And I thought about the town I grew up in, and the only person who had ever been shot dead in that town in my entire life was a crazed woman who attacked a cop with a kitchen knife, and he had to do what he had to do. And nobody could even think of a burglar who had been shot, much less anyone who had been, gunned down by a gang member or anything like that. So growing up in a family of engineers and scientists, and in the process of getting a degree, which include many batteries of research methodology and design and statistics, I said, I want to dig into this a little bit. Well, that started a 30-year rabbit hole. And it eventually evolved into the GunFacts project. And we have really only one mission, and that's to clean up the public understanding about what is true and what isn't true about guns. I released a book in 2020, and Alan Gottlieb of the Second Amendment Foundation, he read it, and he said that this book will annoy and delight both the pro and the anti-gun factions. I said, bingo, exactly what I'm shooting for. If you put good information, you're eventually going to tick off everybody. And it's not my goal to tick off everybody, but it is my goal to get good information out into the public.
Well, I love that because, don't we all really want, yes, we get emotionally tied to narratives, or we get emotionally tied to what our team believes. But ultimately, wouldn't we rather really know what's going on? And so to have a tool at our access, like what you're offering, I feel like, why wouldn't we all lean into that and leave the feelers, right? Like leave our feelings on the sidelines.
Well, you either strive for truth or you strive to win. And if your game, is the achievement of truth, then you win whenever you peddle that. But people who have a belief system, who have a political agenda, who have a goal in mind, they're not particularly interested in the truth. And they will find any means to move the football in their direction. And that's just the unfortunate thing about human nature. People will sacrifice a bit of honesty to achieve, their ideal, social construct.
So interesting. I mean, I'm tempted to ask you, like, is there a particular line of thinking that would, as Alan said, Alan Gottlieb, who's a personal friend, irritate the pro-gun side that off the top of your head?
Not so much lines of thinking, but individual data points that when I bring them up, I get the best reactions out of the pro-gun groups. Here's one. Recently, the FBI's revised criminal data system just gave me an amazing amount of detail, which I had never had available before. And one of the questions I had on my mind is, where are the street gangs and the liquor store holdup artists and what like that getting their guns? Because the Bureau of Justice Statistics every 10 years does a study where anywhere between 47 and 60%, depending on which groups you mash together, indicate that these people are getting their guns off of the streets. So the question to my mind was, how are the guns getting to the streets? Holt is not, setting up a boutique, out on a boulevard in a nasty part of town. Well, after digging through the data, what I found out was that gun theft is the number one cause. And among gun theft, the number one problem is guns being stolen out of people's cars while those cars are parked at a residence, not while they're at the post office or the shopping mall or anyplace else, when they're either parked at home or parked at somebody else's home. And I went to Twitter, which is where, I'm getting most of the interaction nowadays. And I put up that little factoid, and somebody with a very Second Amendment handle, just in all capital letters, said, "Your car is not your holster. Stop it." And, so that was something that they were not real excited to hear. But unlike other groups, they accepted the fact. They said, okay, the hard data says that we are contributing to the problem. We need to change our behaviors.
Yeah, I don't see how that would be a problem, because it's like we, as a responsible gun owner, want to know what's going on out there. And if one of the bad habits we have is leaving the gun in the car, then if we're aware that this is a mass problem, what can I do to make sure that I don't do that?
Yeah.
So I love the information. I want the true facts. Give it to me hard. But math doesn't usually lie if it's done right. Right?
I mean, you can lie with statistics, but you have no reason, you yourself have no reason to do that. You just want to get down to the number.
Well, and that's interesting because we are very aware of all the statistical tricks and all the ways that you can model and use statistics to lie to people. And one of the things we go out of our way to do is to dump the raw data in a, form that can be consumed by anybody and they can understand it. And by sticking to the raw numbers from gold standard sources, we have built just a mountain of credibility. That and the fact that, we will gladly put out data that makes everyone uncomfortable at one time or another.
Yeah. So Guy, I'm not even sure how to form this question, but I'm going to give it a shot. So give me a chance here. So, a lot of the statistics say
easy for you
I'm
to
sorry,
say.
Yeah. They say that, if everybody had to do a background check on a gun, then this wouldn't happen. They're going to gun shows and they're buying guns and they're on the street. And if that's true, what you're saying, that the guns are stolen out of cars, making everybody do background checks wouldn't help at all. It's stopping the guns from being left in cars at night and being stolen is a big contributor to the problem that we have with guns on the street.
Well, even if we, yeah, it does. But even if we remove the stolen gun issue, let's go back to what the Bureau of Justice Statistics tells us every decade. And we're about due for a new report from them, so I'm looking forward to that. Rock bottom minimum, 47% of guns come from street sources. That's the lingo that they use.
Okay.
Then there's another 17%, I got those numbers wrong, 43%, and then another 17%, which are real oddball on the fly gun acquisitions, such as criminal A brings a gun to an event and gives it to criminal B. So that was, another street source. So just using the BJS decade-old data, we know that most of the guns that are used in crimes of all varieties come from the streets. So these are people who are never going to do a background check, are never going to go down to a gun store and fill out additional forms. They're never going to pay whatever little fee, you need to in order to do the transaction through an FFL. So if you're going to target a problem, you don't spend a lot of time on what is demonstrably ineffective because it just simply is not part of the equation.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's just very interesting because a lot of politicians say that if only every gun had to be a background check. And that's not the problem. Now, we don't know how many guns from a gun show go on the street, but we do know that 47% are from stolen or mostly stolen guns, right?
Well, those BJS reports are great because they break down a lot of things, and guns from gun shows are less than 1% of all recovered crime guns. In fact, guns from retail are only about 10%. So here are the major categories. Street sources, without exception, 43%. Another 17%, those oddball things. Then there's another 27%, which are interpersonal transfers. Now, this includes a lot of things. Yes, this includes straw man purchases, but it also includes, giving a gun to your cousin Vinny, who, is a prohibited person, but he's ticked off somebody in the local mob and he feels like he needs protection and then goes and holds up a liquor store with that. Or you give a gun to somebody and it's a perfectly legal gift, but he's, and he doesn't have a record. He's not a prohibited person, but then he goes and does something stupid. So an additional 27. After that, you get the retails and the gun shows and the things like that, and they are just a tiny, minuscule little part of the total number of crime gun acquisitions. So, attacking how people are getting them off the streets is the primary pressure point.
Absolutely. Well, and what I wanted to go back and say is that for our community, our pro-rights advocates for our rights community, what the information you just gave us, if it's still accurate, because you said it was about 10-year-old data, that we're just using our car like it's a holster, and then people are stealing those guns, that's fueling the other side's talking points about we need to have mandatory safe storage. We're helping hand them, a problem that we could fix ourselves. And so I would say, if anybody's getting their back up about it, don't get your back up about it. Use the information to be proactive, to give the other side fewer and fewer opportunities, right? To say, here's a problem that only government can fix.
Yeah, we go to a restaurant and we look at the reviews and decide whether we're going to go to that restaurant or not. If we could look at a report and say, don't leave your gun in your car at night because if it gets stolen, we might not leave our gun in the car at night.
I mean, it's just crazy enough to work, right? Yeah. What do you say, Guy?
I agree with that. And if people are not paying attention to themselves as being part of the problem, it may be out of ignorance, but now that I have put that information out there, it cannot be ignored. And if anyone drops by our website at GunFacts.info, go up to the search bar and just key in the phrase stolen guns, and you'll get to our report where we did that deep dive into the FBI data to fish out those numbers. But as a quick side note, those BGS reports that come out every decade, from decade to decade, they basically haven't changed. This has been rather consistent going all the way back to the 1990s. One curious tidbit, though, was that they did one of these studies before the Brady bill was passed, and then they did another one far enough after the instant background check system went into place. And what we saw was that the number of crime guns purchased at retail dropped by 3%, but the number of guns that were acquired from the street sources went up by 3%. almost an identical transfer. So some criminals who were buying them from retail said, well, I can't do that anymore. We're going to go find a different way to get guns.
Right.
So the problem is consistent. It's just the source of the problem maybe shifts a little bit
Yes.
from one side to the other. Very interesting. So why would you say, I mean, you've been coming at this with a clear, unbiased mind for how long did you say?
Well, GunFacts formally has been in operation for 25 plus years.
25 years. And think about all that has transpired over 25 years. 25 years ago, I don't think we had the Moms Demand. I don't think we had the Mayors Hate Guns. I don't think we had any of that kind of stuff going on. And so, so interesting that you've had that timeline. Why do you think there is so much bad, inaccurate, whatever label you want to put on it, information about guns and violence?
Well, there are three reasons. First, you have activist organizations, and they have an agenda, they have a goal, they, for whatever reason, they push forward and create whatever information they need to create in order to get the public to believe what they believe. I'll give you a great example. Giffords was originally the legal community against gun violence, which all started after the 101 California shooting in San Francisco. So that's important, knowing that lawyers are still actively involved in Giffords. So one year they came out with these huge estimates about the social cost of gun violence. And so I dug in there, and what I found out was that in certain major hotspots like San Francisco, the lion's share of these social costs were estimates of pain and suffering. You know, a nice ambulance chaser term there. Yeah. It wasn't hospital cost, it wasn't social cost, it wasn't court cost, it was this made up number that they needed in order to make the problem look really huge. So activist organizations will either create data or they will present to the public only cherry-picked data in order to get their point across. The second is belief systems. Everyone has belief systems. We all build these rubrics, you know, to understand the universe and to get us through the day without having a mental collapse. And people, when they encounter data that reinforces their belief system, will immediately accept it without checking it, and then will immediately pass it on to people. And thus that pollutes the political waters. At the GunFacts website, we have a page called the Bad Research Roster. And it includes a dissection of certain reports that got media attention. And to get on the roster, you have to have 2 or more things in your study, which were either bad data quality or bad methodologies. This is a twofer. One, the media, they're not trained in statistics or criminology or anything else. So they get a report from an activist group. They just pass it along to their readers, in part because it probably agrees with their biases too. But here's the twofer part. The medical community has been generating a lot of bad research. And Johns Hopkins University, which is closely associated with and funded by Michael Bloomberg, has more entries than anyone else on the GunFacts bad research roster. So I bring up the bad research roster. So if any of your listeners ever confront somebody on social media that cites a study, go by our website first and see if we've already disassembled this, because you know you can then just copy and paste what we've written and put it in your reply. And then the last thing, let's see what we had: activists, belief systems, bad data and analysis getting passed around without question is part of the problem. And occasionally people make up their own insight without even doing any homework to verify it. And I got an email from a pro-gun person once, and he said, well, mass public shootings may be increasing, but that's a function of the population expanding. It's only going up with the rise of the population. And I'm so deep in the data, I kind of shook my head and I said, no, that can't be right, but I'll at least, kind of shook my head and I said, no, that can't be right, but I'll at least, formalize this. And he was completely wrong. But, that shows that, again, people will generate bad data on their own and then pass it around. And you get back into bias confirmation, and one bad meme can infect 1 million people on Twitter in a day.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And I guess I really am in this conversation mentally leading into wanting my own beliefs to be challenged and people who think like me to be challenged, because that's where we can learn the most. We already think we know things that the other side is, churning out that we disagree with, but it's important to lean into that as well, right? Because there might be things that we think are untrue that they're saying that aren't untrue. But
so could I ask a question about that?
yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so Guy, I've heard reports that they say a person who has a firearm in their house is more likely to cause a problem than use it for defense. Have you heard of those reports, and what do you think?
I have heard of those reports. This goes all the way back to a doctor out in Washington State. And most of them commit the same sin over and over again. They include suicides in the data. And that's the first of the two sins. And as horrible as suicides are, and I lost a very dear friend to a firearm suicide when I was still in college. As bad as they are, it's self-inflicted harm.
Right.
And we're not really that interested in self-inflicted harm. We're interested in making sure we're not shot by somebody else for no good reason.
Right.
So that's the first sin that they commit. The other sin that they commit, and they bundle these two into the same study, is that they only count fatal self-defense shootings. Well, there are a dozen different ways to do armed self-defense. We unraveled this once in one of our studies, and we used some great data that was proffered by one of the police associations in a massive survey. You can tell somebody you have a gun. You can chamber a round in a shotgun behind a closed door. You can pull your jacket open and show them that you have a gun. You can pull out a gun and hold it at low ready to tell them that you're really serious. Then you can point it at them and say, no, I'm really serious. You can then fire a warning shot ill-advised, but you can fire a warning shot. That's another defensive gun use. You can then shoot them in the leg, and that's a different non-fatal defensive gun use. And then finally, you can plug them in the forehead if you have to. That's 8 different self-defense uses all in one event. But the people who are doing this invalid comparison only count that last one. So they make self-defense gun use look really small, and then they make bad episodes happening at home really large by including suicides, which on your average year make up more than half of all gun deaths in the country.
Suicide is a problem, and I wish we could fix that. But when we're taking these different types of situations, they should be accurate with that and be more honest about it so that people can form their own opinions.
Well, I think it's because the cure, if there is such a thing, right, is different depending on whether we are talking about, a mental despair, which leads to suicide, right? Or, inner city disenfranchisement issues, which lead to inner city gang and the violence they create. And, all the different things have a different, you don't go to an oncologist if you have heart issues, right? But we want to treat it all like it's one issue, I guess. Am I saying that right, Guy?
You absolutely are. The motivations for a guy who holds up the liquor store are different than the motivations of the member of the Crips.
Thank
and
you.
The motivation of the member of Crips is different than the guy out in Seattle who's just had enough with life and wants to end it. And his motivations are different than the two of you in owning a gun and how you might use it in self-defense, blah, blah, blah. So one of the problems is that some of the activist group do amalgamate all of this. Then they come up with these really strange memes like the epidemic of gun violence. And by doing that, they make no progress in solving any of the individual issues. And I think that's what frustrates me the most, is that if all sides used real data to break down the problems, understand each problem, then you could actually start to make progress on each of them. But there's so much butting of the heads and tossing logic grenades back and forth and sharing of bad data that, we don't make a lot of progress.
Right. If you could convince me that carrying a gun is wrong, that statistics show that it's wrong, I might take that advice to hand. But all the information we're getting is just to satisfy their little deal. It's a bunch of lies. And it's a shame, because I think you're right. If we could come up with true facts, we might be able to solve some of these problems.
Well, and that's why I'm here. And what I keep telling everybody is that I am the last independent source that's out there in the marketplace. And I love that position. I love the fact that I'm not a member of a political party. I'm not a member of any group, unless you count Sons of the American Revolution, which is basically a history club, and I haven't been to a meeting in 25 years. And I don't have an agenda. I don't have policy recommendations. That's one of the things you'll rarely ever see at GunFacts. We don't make policy recommendations. We're just shoveling. We are data butlers is what we are. And we're getting as much clean data out to the people as possible.
Well, Guy, the big problem with that is these big organizations that want to abolish guns or whatever reasons they have, they're not going to listen to your data. Isn't that sad?
Well, it's sad, but they're not my audience. My audience is the large middle swath of the American public. 45% of people now claim to Gallup that they are independents. It's the largest voting bloc in the country. So my audience are people who are interested in understanding the difference. And what I do is I give them the tools so that as they're engaging friends, family, or strangers, especially online, that they can make salient points with real data. Here's one thing your audience should know. If they go to the GunFacts website, you're going to see a bunch of charts, each one addressing a very, very particular issue. Click on the chart. It will open up a new tab in your browser, and you'll get a very big version of that chart. The copyright rules at GunFacts are you can copy and share any of our charts copyright free. The only restriction is you can't change the chart. So if you're having a discussion with somebody on Twitter or Facebook and they say blah, 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 come to our website, find a chart, hand it to them. We put the sources down in the lower left-hand corner, and the argument tends to evaporate very quickly.
That's awesome. So what do the numbers tell us about, in the United States, what are the biggest violence problems as they relate to guns?
Without fear of argument from anyone who's ever studied the data, the number one cause of gun violence in America are street gangs. Absolutely. Doesn't matter whether you go from the bottom up using crime data or if you go from the top down like we did when we had to correct for gaps in the FBI's information. It is the biggest source. Among the academics who have done the bottom up, on the high end of their estimates, they think about 50% of gun homicides are street gang related. Now, this is important. They specifically said related. In other words, it was a specific action that was to benefit the gang itself. But there's a lot of collateral damage out there. I used to live next door to Oakland, California, and in one year, there were two different news stories about 8 months apart, 9 months apart, of two different 8-year-old boys who died because they happened to be standing next to a gang member when he was targeted in a drive-by shooting.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a lot of collateral damage. So in our study, we said, can we estimate the number of people killed in events that were gang related or gang nexus? In other words, it was gang activities, but victims who are not members of a gang got hit.
Mm-hmm.
Our estimate was about 85%. So
Wow.
we're looking at 50 to 85% of gun homicides in the United States are caused by gangs. Here's a little side note. If you could wave a magic wand, and if our 85% number was accurate, and get rid of gang violence, the homicide rate in the United States would be equal to or lower than most Western European nations. We would have homicide rates similar to the UK and France and Germany and Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So, Guy, that report, is it based on gang violence is usually more than, has a lot of victims in each occurrence, or is it just one-on-one?
In the academic studies, it counted anybody who was involved in gangs who got shot. So if multiple people caught bullets during a rival gang intervention, then those were counted. But I'm not clear that they always counted the nexus people, the innocent bystanders, which is what we did.
Well, you have to count them because they're part of the problem. I mean, it was a gang-related shooting. You got to count I would think you would count everybody in that.
I think it's the appropriate approach because, innocent bystanders count more than gang members as far as I'm concerned. And if we can clean up gang violence, we save a lot of innocent people.
Yeah, just like it would be an interesting thing to find out, and maybe it's on your facts, but people that have used a gun in self-defense that have missed the target and shot someone else. That would be an interesting thing because there's been discussions about that.
Yes, and I have no solid data to help me with that. Some of the new FBI data might allow me to dig down and find self-defense shootings and see how many people were killed, and then I can look at the relationships between them. But that doesn't really tell us a lot because it might say stranger, but for all you know, that stranger might have been part of the ongoing crime that required a self-defense. So I'll look into that data sometime, but my understanding of all the data that's in the new anti-B.S. system that the FBI is using probably is not going to give us the whole story.
Yeah, they're not going to be clear with their reports, so it's going to be hard to dig that information up. But there has been talks where people say more people, that people get killed as a bystander in a self-defense shoot.
Well, they try to use that to say that.
So that's why you shouldn't carry a gun.
Yeah.
You shouldn't try to.
But I don't know. They're probably making those things up because you're saying even you haven't really encountered that. But I want to kind of. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Guy.
I want to hear.
Well, no, it's an interesting problem, but here's the key observation. The number of self-defense shootings that involve somebody dying in the process is extremely small. So even if that were a factor, even if there were some number of innocent bystanders caught in a self-defense shooting in public, that number would be so trivial small that it would make the number of people killed in mass public shootings look huge by comparison. And that's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the total gun deaths in the country. So, yeah, it may be a reality, but it's going to be a tiny one.
Yeah. So self-defense shootings, there's not a whole lot where there's been a person where it's been killed.
Yeah, I'm going to have to roll up those numbers after the next round of anti-B.S. data comes out, and I'm really interested in that topic. One of the problems in criminology is some of the data is so mismanaged and inconsistent, and the new anti-B.S. system is so bad that the one huge data set that we've loaded into our databases here at GunFacts, it's missing all of LA County because LA County did not report to the FBI during all of 2003. So we're waiting for 2000. Oh yeah, well, LA, it's LA.
Well, it is another country.
I wouldn't elevate it that much. I have traveled a lot in my life, and LA is the only city where I never found anything to love about it.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. So I want to kind of go back to the gang violence issue. So, and I know you don't write policy, and I don't think you, offer suggestions or anything, but just to unpack it for a minute. So the key things there, this isn't really a gun problem, right? Because that can be fixed with the solutions that have been laid out on the table. So the universal background check, we already know that's not going to positively impact this, right? Safe storage at home, that's not going to positively impact this. What are some of the other
Well, it
ones?
could. Safe storage at home, if it could prevent a theft in your house,
No,
could.
I'm saying of the gang
Okay,
members, the people actually doing the
okay,
violent
okay,
encounters.
okay.
I'm just trying to think of some of the key things that they lay out there for us for all of us to live under. It's like they're really, again, they're going to the cancer doctor to fix a heart issue, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, there's two ways of looking at this. There's what can we do in the short term that doesn't require the gang's involvement in any way, shape, or form, and then there's what is long term. The big problem is that this is a cultural issue. Street gangs have their own culture. They are a
mhm,
subculture of a subculture. Um, and the American street gangs are different than street gangs anywhere else in the world. They
mm,
have a predatory and a fatal violence first mantra. Part of their culture is that taking a human life is absolutely required, not even preferable, but required in many instances.
oh wow.
Uh, yeah, one gang, this one really floored me when I saw it, but one American gang requires you to commit a homicide witnessed by another gang member in order to get into the gang.
Oh
Other
my
gangs,
gosh.
other gangs require you to kill a rival gang member on site. In some neighborhoods, if you're a young black man who is not in a gang and you walk into a specific gang territory, you are assumed by those gangs to be a member of a rival gang, and it is perfectly legitimate for that gang to shoot you. So not only is the gang mentality and culture in America the core of the problem, but the gang participation rate in America is astronomical.
Mm,
Chicago has a gang participation rate that's, if I remember the number correctly, is 254 times, not 254%, 254 times that of London. And
Well,
London is a much bigger city.
yes.
So more
Wow.
gang members, more gangs, and an ethos that says kill first, ask questions later. So that's the core of the biggest violence problem in America. And in the long run, we can't fix that until we fix the culture.
Mm,
The culture of the inner cities has to change so that they marginalize, belittle, and condemn gang activity from the bottom up, and eventually make being a gang member so repulsive and so unfavorable in the public that a future generation starts walking away from the problem. That's the
mhm,
long term solution. In the
mhm,
short term, there have been a lot of experiments about how to reduce gang participation. And the biggest one in terms of success is a targeted intervention process. Operation Ceasefire in Boston, Boston, is kind of like the poster child. And why they discontinued it, I will never know. Um, but with inside of gangs, a lot of people may never commit an act of violence, but they have a few select people who I call super killers, but they are gang to the core. They are often in a leadership position in the gang. And if one of them gets arrested, and this comes from a couple of police statements I've seen over the years, but if a gang member is under arrest for suspicion of homicide, he's also the lead suspect in 2 to 3 other homicides.
wow.
So these suppression programs look at the gangs, figure out who the worst of the actors are, severely target them, and then they make it known to the rest of the gang that if we see more gun violence and we think your gang is responsible, then you guys are not going to be able to go to the bathroom without us, trying to arrest you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that works. So that's the short to medium term. Crack down on the gangs and specifically the super killers. But then you got to change the culture. Otherwise, the moment that you let up, it'll just come back.
Well, and we've heard, and we're getting close on time. We could talk to you for 2 hours
Yes.
easily, but we've heard that in a lot of these places, like in Chicago, that they say they're so tough on guns, and that's one of the anti-gun, strongholds, and so on and so forth. But that's the first charge that gets pled down when these people come in, and they just churn them out, and the same guy can, pad the numbers on the books like 5 times in a day, like same guy, different gun, new crime, over and over again. It's just, and I feel like that is almost purposeful, which I don't want to put you on the spot to, have an opinion like that, but it's what it feels like to me.
Well, if your listeners go to our YouTube channel, you'll find a video where I had a lot of fun with Gavin Newsom. And I used to live in California. During his political ascension, I was in the San Francisco area, so I got to watch him up close and personal, and I'll stop right there. But the reason I put together this video is that America had the most extensive experiment in crime control ever. In 4 short years, starting in 1993, and 1993 was when violent crime peaked in the United States. In 4 years, 24 states with over half of the country's population passed habitual offender laws. Think in terms of 3 strikes. Think about that for a minute. Half of the states, realistically, with more than half of the population, said, we're tired of this, and we're going to start throwing people in jail. Well, I come back to California. In the first decade of their 3 strikes program, and they passed theirs in 1993, according to the Assembly Analyst Office, they processed nearly 90,000 people for 2nd and 3rd strikes. That is like 2 good-sized football stadiums. 90,000 people. And California went from having a violent crime rate that was 40% above the national average to a crime rate that was equal to the national average, but the national average was falling during all that time. So they caught up plus because they simply said habitual criminals are part of the problem, and we're going to start putting the bad actors, the ones who never straighten up, in prison for a long time.
And we don't do that anymore. And that's one of the problems. We slap them on the hand and let them go again. And I saw an article. I don't know if it's true, but I saw an article on Fox News where a guy was arrested 3 times in one day for stealing a car. He got arrested 3 times.
Cars, yeah.
He stole a car, got arrested, stole a car, got arrested in one day, 24-hour period. So how does that solve the problem? Anyway, that's another story.
It does not. But tonight, we're in the studio on February 24th, 2026. Tonight is the State of the Union address. I know one of the things the president is going to boast is that crime is at a low. I don't know if it's a historic low and all time. I don't know what words he's going to put on it. What do you say about that? Or have you even looked into that to be able to answer this question?
Well, this is where we get into some really hard stuff about the data. Let's say 2 things first. We came down from the peak in 1993. Crime fell, and then it kind of bobbed along for a long time horizontal. And that horizontal area got us back to violent crime rates that we saw in the late 60s and the early 70s. So a huge success. I mean, I would almost call that a win in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Well, then several things happened all at once. We had the George Floyd riots. We had the defund the police movements. You had voluntary police pullbacks because of that, but also because of COVID. So during this era, starting in 2020 and then extending, at least up into the first parts of 2022, violent crime in the country went way up. Interesting thing about street gangs is that they do their business on the streets. And when you take a lot of police off the streets for whatever reason, including that they've been told, don't engage with the public because we don't want you passing around the virus as well. You take those cops back off the streets, then the street gangs have clear field. They can run. We've got a study up on our website. It was just a review of literature, but we ran across 2 detailed academic studies that, looked at all of this stuff, and, they did the correlations, and it was really compelling. So we get past COVID, we get past George Floyd, blah, 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 this big peak, and crime starts to drop down. It dropped back down basically to where it was before, and there's some early reports just by looking at city level data for a handful of cities that maybe it's dropping even faster and we'll be at a lower rate than we were before the pandemic. Me being a purist, I'm going to wait until we get the annual data dumps from the FBI to dig into that. But let's at least say that it's not worse than it was before the pandemic, and it may be getting better.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's a very measured response, which I would expect, right? Because you want to have the data so that what you're saying is based in the data that you've been given. So I appreciate that.
I have one little question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Guy, do you think that the FBI data is accurate?
Bad data is the bane of my existence. I tell you what, the first time I started looking at the supplemental homicide reports from the FBI, I downloaded the raw data instead of the distillation they published.
Right.
And I said, well, that's interesting. There were no gun homicides in Florida for the entire year. Why is that? Well, it just so happens that Florida had never participated in the supplemental homicide report process. And so to complete my analysis, I had to go to the state website and get their data and mesh it up so that, the classifications agreed with the FBI data. That's 2 days of my life lost right there. So data quality is always a terrible thing. Now, here's the short story about what happened with the FBI. For a long time, people said, we can do better. The uniform crime reports are great, but they're limited. They don't tell us a lot. For example, the first time I wanted to study stolen guns, the way stolen guns were reported in the UCR data was that the local cop estimated the value of the guns that were stolen, not counted the number of guns, not the type of guns were stolen.
Oh, wow.
What was the dollar value? And
that
led to all sorts of questions, like were they gun hobbyists and they were kind of thinking about this? Did they have a reseller book? Were they calling up the local gun shop and asking, what this Remington was worth? Yeah, all the estimates are different. So the FBI comes up with NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS, I call it. And I was so hungry for that data. And they had been coaching the states for a decade saying, we're going to launch this. You need to be ready. You need to get your act together. This is the data files. This is how the inputting is done, blah, blah, blah. The FBI went out of their way to try to make a success of it. Problem was that their launch date was 2021, in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh.
Police staffing has gone down. They are traumatized. Budgets are restricted. And a lot of local law enforcement didn't get prepared like they were told for a decade to do. Mm. So I told you the 2023 data was missing all of Los Angeles County. Well, there were other places around the country where the data was missed. 2022, forget about it. I wouldn't try to make a statistical estimate out of that data for anything. In 2021, they might as well not have even released the data. Mm. So to answer your question, data is messy. It's people like me who understand the messiness and figure out how we can produce meaningful answers despite the messiness. And things are getting better with the FBI's data, but they're still dependent on the quality of the input that they get from the local levels. And if Los Angeles isn't going to report their data until 2024 and they missed January, so it's going to be an incomplete report anyway, we're going to have to deal with it.
So one other question, how do you sleep at night? That would drive me crazy.
It does drive me crazy, but I keep the goal in mind, which is put the quality information out there. And when the information has problems like this, explain it to the audience so that they're not, bamboozled by it. They understand the limitations. And to get just the best information that we can out. And that lets me sleep really well at night. What bothers me is how does somebody in either an ardent pro or anti-gun group who has an agenda, who is cherry picking the data, blah, 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 how do they sleep well at night?
Right.
Yes.
Well, I agree with
that.
So Guy, how do we let the public know how to get to your site so that they can find this accurate information?
Well, let me tell you all the good contact points. The website is the best one, GunFacts.info, I-N-F-O. Everyone always types in .com, but that one was taken when I originally set up camp. While you're there, let me suggest that you go to the alerts and volunteer page and sign up for the 2 blogs. These are very low frequency blogs. You are not going to hear from us very often. One is called Short Shots, and that's where we share data that we find interesting, but it's not part of a big formal analysis. And then the other one is the regular blog, and that's when we've done a deep dive into something or other, and we're going to try to educate you more than you really want to be educated. So gunfacts.info is the first place. Facebook and Twitter, we have a camp on each of those. Facebook is kind of low volume, short shot level. But if you want to hear every thought and observation that we have as we stumble across it, go to Twitter. We've got, I think, 9,500 followers at this point. Not a mountain, but then again, we're a niche organization.
Right.
But that's where we break the interesting observations. That's where we broke the observations about guns being stolen out of cars and stuff like that. So if you're already active on Twitter, by all means, hit that follow button.
Well, Guy, I appreciate what you're doing. I think that it's good. And for people that really want to know the truth, it's awesome. So thank you for being here with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
I echo that. And we've got to have you back on if you'll come, because there's so many questions that we didn't even get to. So expect an invitation.
Anytime.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was awesome. It's unbelievable. To think about it, your car left overnight in your house is the most.
And that's so fixable.
Yeah, it is.
Don't wait for the government. Don't wait for the other side to say, hey, I'm going to run these bills that make everybody do safe storage in their home,
Right.
because
we're going to fine you if your car if a gun gets stolen out of your car.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, once we know the problem, I think we're pretty good at trying to truly fix it. But what happens is we're being fed false problems and being forced to go along with the solutions. Right. And that's where we bristle. And
we bristle?
We bristle.
Well,
good
I
word.
haven't bristled in a long time.
Anyway, thank you so much to Guy Smith. I felt like that was fascinating, and I would love to take a deeper dive on, tell me where my thinking has gone awry. Mm-hmm. Because that's where we can really, dig deeper on what we can do to be part of the solution and fix what's really broken and take more and more ammo away from the other side, right? More of their talking points away from them.
Because you and I are responsible gun owners, mm-hmm. and we want to know, is Chicago bad crime because guns are coming from other states?
Right. I should have asked him that. There's so many questions.
Right. There
wanted to ask.
Anyway, we are so much out of time.
We are.
And we need to pray for our nation. We need to talk about other stuff. So go on it.
We do, definitely. Again, thank you so much to Guy Smith of GunFacts.info. Please go follow him. sign up for the X page, the Twitter page. I am definitely going to do that
Yes.
myself. And check out some of the charts. Definitely sign up for his blog. So again, that's GunFacts.info. Thank you to Guy. Thank you to all of our amazing listeners and viewers wherever there is internet across this globe. We have viewers and listeners, and we appreciate you so much. Your time is your most valuable asset, and when you spend it with us, we value that very, very highly. If you want to watch this video over again, share it with a friend, or watch any of our videos, go to any of the video platforms like YouTube. Click the subscribe and the notification button because that does two things. It keeps you in the know when we have the next guest on, but also it tells those platforms that you value this information and it gives us a little hedge against the cancel culture. If you want to listen to the audio only version because you're out on a long bike ride or a car ride or something, go to our website, gunfreedomradio.com, click the on demand tab, and
Binge listen to your heart's content, darling.
darling. Oh, you threw a little bit of Southern in there that time. And if you want to see photos and bios of Guy Smith and all of our guests that we've ever had on, click the guest tab. It is an ever-growing database of subject matter experts, and when you spend time there, we don't hate that. All right, until next time, please. Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot to talk
Talk
about.
about those delicious steaks and the great phone calls. And
That's right. So patriothousehold.com is an invitation-only private shopping club, and we are inviting you today. Go to patriothousehold.com/GFR. Stop shopping at those big box stores that use your money against your own values and beliefs and rights.
they got stuff like this.
They do delicious snacks, delicious steaks
Steak,
and hamburger,
chicken.
laundry soap, shampoo, lotions, all the stuff that you buy at the other stores. Start buying it through patriothousehold.com/GFR. We get a little piece of every order you place to fuel the work that we do. On the topic of Patriot, there's patriotmobile.com, and our family has switched over all of our mobile gadgets, our phones, to Patriot Mobile because they are America's only Christian conservative wireless provider that shares your values. Switch to Patriot Mobile now using our promo code GFR, like Gun Freedom Radio, for all kinds of free goodies. You get to keep your number, keep your phone, and keep your values. I like to say that all my phone calls, texts, and selfies are fueled by Patriot Mobile. We have been from coast to coast and top to bottom of the United States, and we have had perfect cell service. It has been amazing. Lastly, attorneys on retainer. So if you are someone who is prepared minded enough that you train and you carry, then you should be prepared minded enough to get an attorney on retainer. And again, use our promo code GFR for Gun Freedom Radio. Because if you do have to ever, God forbid, defend your life or someone else's, the law will visit itself upon you, and you will be so happy that you have an attorney on retainer. Our family, our members and clients, and we have so much peace of mind because of that. So check out those organizations, support the people who support us and support you. And until next time, pray for our nation. Pray for our leaders, especially the ones. Look at him.
What? I didn't do nothing. The people that are looking on TV didn't see that.
Especially the ones
You don't like.
he's making an
the ones you don't like.
ugly face about the ones he doesn't like, and
Well, I could like them.
but then pray for them.
I could
It'll
if they
help
would
you
just
like them.
if they would just think of the Constitution and our rights. I could like every politician, even the ones. Oh, never mind.
Anyway, especially the ones you don't like probably need your prayers.
Okay.
All right, till next time, be good to each other. Have a great week, and God bless.
Bye.